Chapter 52. Austria's War. From the beginning, which is to say, from mid-June, when Berchtold put his Foreign Office to work on a plan, Vienna's intent had been to crush Serbia without outside interference. To be able to focus all resources on the Serbian campaign was the Austrian dream. Vienna had declared war on Serbia July 28. Konrad von Hötzendorf, Austria's chief of staff, promptly sent half his army by railroad to the Serbian frontier, with the other half in reserve to back it up. The Austrians learned almost at once that they and their German ally had been working at cross purposes. Vienna had planned its invasion of Serbia in the belief that Berlin would take steps to keep Russia out of the war. Instead, Germany deliberately was pulling Russia into the war. Germany opted for war during the week of July 27, and made its move final on July 31. Mobilization was ordered that day, to be followed by a declaration of war on Russia the following day. Moltke and his colleagues in Berlin told Konrad to forego a Serbian campaign for the time being and instead to send the bulk of his army to the Russian frontier, leaving only a skeleton force to defend against a possible Serbian attack. If Konrad complied, if he recalled troops to new positions before they had taken up the old ones, he risked bringing about administrative confusion. The logistics of such a move were challenging. In any event, Konrad did not want to do it. He had been scheming to bring about a Serbian war for so many years that it must have seemed unbearable to give it up at the last moment, just as he had gotten agreement for it, in order to help Germany first. He decided that his forces would remain in the Serbian campaign for a while, but then some would be withdrawn on August 18 and reassigned to the Russian front. Konrad wanted to cash Germany's blank check before Germany had a chance to withdraw it. He was trying to launch the invasion of Serbia in August, that he was supposed to have initiated, and concluded, in July. In a letter to Moltke dated August 2, he explained that he was continuing to conduct his operations against Serbia in such a way as to keep Russia from entering the war. One of the things that emerges from Konrad's various explanations is that he did not understand that Germany's policy and objectives had changed. On July 5 to the 6th, the Kaiser had hoped, and had been sure, that Europe would remain inactive on the sidelines while Austria succeeded in crushing Serbia. Germany's policy had been to persuade Russia, France, Britain, and the others to stay out. Now, animated by Moltke, Falkenhayn, and their colleagues, Berlin had reversed itself. Konrad was being told that Germany no longer was backing Austria's war and that Austria now had to back Germany's war. Moltke and Konrad never had really coordinated their war plans fully. Since each proposed to use the other for his own purposes, the two army chiefs may have felt they could not afford to be too open with one another. In any event, they were paying the price for it in the opening months of the war, as each attempted to go his own way and to get his own way. Konrad had wanted Russia deterred. He much preferred not to go to war with the Russians or the French, or, later, the British, or, later still, the Americans. Germany's role, as Konrad saw it, was to keep Russia out of the fight, not to bring it into the conflict. The only country Konrad wanted to fight in the summer of 1914 was Serbia. Konrad was bellicose, and in other circumstances would happily have waged war against such neighbors as Italy. But as pre-Sarajevo history demonstrated, Germany did not see Serbia as a danger. It felt no need to eliminate the Balkan kingdom. It was Konrad and his government that feared Serbia. Moltke feared Russia, and its ally France. From Germany's point of view, the only use for the Serbian conflict was that it bound Austria to remain faithful to Germany in Germany's war against Russia and France. By August 1, 1914, that goal had been accomplished. From Moltke's point of view, the Serbian affair had served its purpose. But from Konrad's perspective it had not. Hence Conrad played truant in the opening weeks of the two intertwined wars. He ordered his soldiers to ride the trains south instead of north. In doing so he stole for his country a fleeting chance to engage in its private duel with Serbia, 1-against-1. His armies invaded Serbia. They brought the Serbians to battle. And, crushingly, overwhelmingly, the Austrians lost. The Habsburg armies never seemed to have recovered from their initial mislocations and dislocations. After attacking Serbia and being defeated, their private war was concluded, and they joined the wider conflict. They moved to the Russian front and were crushed there too. By the beginning of December 1914 the Habsburg Empire, according to John Keegan, no longer was a military great power. He tells us that it had lost 1,268,000 men out of 3,350,000 mobilized. Austria fought on, under German high commanders, in a struggle not so much to conquer as to survive. Conrad was in despair. At the start of the war, awarded a medal, he had remarked, "If only I knew for what." As the failures mounted he confided to colleagues that if he lost the war it would cost him the comfort of his beloved Gina. He was overcome by self-pity. All the blame, he reflected, would be unloaded onto me. I will probably have to disappear from the scene like an outlaw. I have no home, no woman who will stand by my side in my final years. He remembered his sometime mentor, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who cared so much for his beloved Austrian army, and who, year after year, had opposed the plans to fight Serbia and to estrange Russia, the Archduke, whose murder had been exploited cynically by Vienna in order to bring about the very war he so ardently opposed. Franz Ferdinand's shadow loomed large over the world that summer. What would he have thought? What would he have said? What would he have done? Had the Archduke still been alive, Conrad had to admit, he would have had me shot. Chapter 53. Germany's War. Berchtold, especially in July, and Conrad, especially in August, were the active agents who led Austria into a war with Serbia. They did so with full support from the cabinet and the foreign office of the dual monarchy, and with at least the approval of the elderly emperor. There is no question that the two of them did it, and meant to do it. The only question in that regard is the extent to which Berchtold was influenced by his foreign office staff. Berchtold frequently is named as the single person who also was most responsible for the wider war. That, as we can see now, is not true. The accusation confuses the two wars. What he wanted was the Serbian war, not the other one. He was willing to risk a wider conflict if he had to, but he did not desire it. It was Moltke who wanted a war against Russia and France. He always had held back, or had been held back, from initiating such a war in past crises because the circumstances never had been quite right. Everything had to be in place. The Kaiser's authority had to be on the wane, Austrian participation had to be assured, and Russia had to look like the aggressor. Suddenly, toward the end of July 1914, all did fall into place. Moltke leapt at the chance, he saw that his hour had come, and he seized it. His artful substitution of his war for Berchtold's on Berlin's July agenda was a sort of confidence trick that kept generations afterwards in the dark as to who caused what. He had exchanged early July's policy for a late July policy, and one war for another. He could not have done it had he not represented a force bigger than himself. He represented the Prussian Junker officer caste whose militarization of German life led to the war. Germany's militarist culture had been identified in 1914 as the cause of the coming war by, among others, Colonel House. Germany declared war on Russia August 1. Its proposed timetable was the Moltke Plan. The plan called for the German army to meet its rendezvous with destiny on French soil in 6 weeks. There and then it would bring France, Russia's ally, to battle. The battle would be decisive. It was intended to knock France out of the war, out of the Russian alliance, and out of the political history of Europe. 6 weeks after August 1st, the German army did indeed meet its rendezvous with destiny on French soil. For friends of France and Britain, it was a heart-stoppingly close-run thing. The Germans almost won it. Instead, France and Britain did. And the battle, the First Battle of the Marne, was decisive. What it decided was that neither side could gain a quick victory or a real victory. Instead, the conflict was to become an endurance contest lasting 4 years, and ruining victor and vanquished alike. Nor were its results in 1918 conclusive, for the parties did not accept them as such. The war between Germany, on one side, and Russia, France, Britain, and the United States, on the other, resumed in 1939–41, and it too failed to resolve the question of which power would be supreme on the continent, and whether the United States and Britain would accept that supremacy. The conflict that Germany's military leaders initiated by declaring war on Russia August 1, 1914, did not come to an end until the last Russian soldier left German soil on August 31, 1994. For nearly a century, debate has raged among participants and then among scholars about the decisive battle with which the Moltke Plan concluded, the Battle of the Marne in September 1914. On the German side, the question was whether it was Moltke or his young envoy Richard Hensch who ordered the retreat and regroupment behind the Marne, and whether ordering the withdrawal was the correct decision or whether it snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. At the time 33 German generals were fired by the Kaiser. Shortly afterwards, Moltke, too, lost his job. Wilhelm was unforgiving. Moltke obviously could not have foreseen the full hideousness of the long war of the 20th century, the 1914 war that led to the 1939 war that led to the Cold War, nor the tens of millions who would die in it, nor the multitude of consequences to which the war directly or indirectly would give rise. But he knew well enough who had started the war. In June 1915, Moltke, who had been shifted to a job he regarded as of little importance, complained of this to his friend General, Baron, Colmar von der Goltz. "It is dreadful to be condemned to inactivity in this war," he wrote to his friend, "this war which I prepared and initiated," emphasis added. "It is an arresting thought that, to the extent that any individual did so, this modest, unexceptional, and indeed rather ordinary career army officer started the Great War, and thereby ushered in the 20th century, with all of its horrors and wonders."